Tic tac, tic tac, tic tac. People in the chat, you won't know, but I just done a whole intro and I hadn't gone live. But listen, hey, it is what it is. This is why my channel is called Carnage. Carnage ensues wherever I go, it seems. You're very, very welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in to a special edition of Transfer Carnage. I say special, every show is special on Football Khanage, as you guys know. The road to 30,000 is so close. I believe I'm about 70 away. It will be amazing if I could reach 30,000 on a show like today's, where there's plenty of other good news. So what's another bit of good news, eh? Come on, help a brother and like and subscribe if you haven't as you come in. You're all very, very welcome. As I said, we will be tucking into all things transfers and more specifically transfer. Because, ladies and gentlemen in the chat, my esteemed guests and panel, we are on the verge, and I say verge because we haven't, I don't mean Virgil van Dijk, but on the verge of signing an actual central midfielder. And let me remind you, the last time we bought a central midfielder, the first COVID lockdown had just ended. Stefan Bejitic was still at school. Donald Trump was the president of the USA. Carlo Ancelotti was the Everton manager, and the Reds were newly crowned champions. Wow, that was a long time ago. Credit to all that stats and info goes to Henry Jackson. Make sure you go and check him out. Football writer for This Is Anfield. I did say I would credit him. I'm a man of my word. So there you go, Henry. No need to DM me angrily and say, why did you use my stats and info? But as you guys can see, I have an esteemed panel with me. What's going on here? Right, so getting messages and information as we speak. Wow, what a busy night it's been. What a busy day it's been. Conroy, hello. We spoke last night. We exclusively revealed, well, I did. Pat myself on the back. The price for the potential price for Alexis Mac Allister. Today we were waiting for the Paul Joyce dagger, as I call it. He waited. I thought he was going to come last week. He took his time. But this is why we love Paul Joyce, because he checks, he double checks, and he triple checks his sources. And today he kind of sort of reiterated what we've been saying, that Alexis Mac Allister will become a Liverpool football player this week. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and like we said last night, I think it's a massive deal if we can get it through quite early as well, you know, especially with pre-season and the way we look at that. So I think it'd be absolute massive signing. And you know how much I love him. I know Mo's not maybe seen me talk about Mac Allister, but I have liked him for quite a long time. It's not just, you know, the trendy thing to do. I've been a big fan of him for the year and a half at Brighton, so I feel like he'd suit us. His adaptability, can play a 6, can play an 8. Probably if he does sign, would get potentially a number 10, so he can do that position as well. I think it'd be a great asset for us, and I know we're going to speak about like the actual price. If it is anything near what they're suggesting it is, I think it might be an absolute snip for Liverpool. So let's hopefully it gets confirmed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's always good to say that end part, even though everyone, including Fabrizio Romano, Mo, has said that here we go, and that it's sort of done. From my understanding, from what I've been told, the legal binding paperwork hasn't been completed. Everything points and suggests it to being completed before the end of the week. Mo, before we get into sort of what it means as a team, as a player in our team, and the formation and how he's a player, me and you have been speaking about FSG for months, possibly years. And we've had varying opinions. We don't always agree, but the beauty of it is that we absolutely respect each other, and that's why we find each other talking on each other's shows and face to face. Mo, but this time round, I was adamant, along with you, and you had been telling me for many months before. Once we had pulled out of Jude Bellingham, it was imperative that we acted quickly, swiftly, and efficiently to resolve any doubts, which there was many, in the Liverpool fan base that we do mean business. This, my friend, is just a start. Yes, absolutely, it's great business, and we're going to get into it. But it's just a start, right? But it's a start in the right direction.
Yeah, it completely is. I've been saying that this really is the biggest transfer window in the history of FSG's time at the club, because we're at a real sliding doors moment for them as owners now. Huge amount of criticism, scrutiny, questioning about them as owners and what direction they want to take us in, especially over the last 6 months, back to November, when stories broke that, they were potentially looking at selling the club. And then 3 months later, then they said, well, actually, we're looking to stay. And then the question was, okay, if you're staying, what are you going to bring to the table? Great that you did what you did in 2010, but that's water under the bridge and then some. That was 13 years ago. What are you doing now? So, now is the time for them to step up, especially in light of the fact we missed out on Champions League football. So we really need to turn things around quickly and get back into the place that we become accustomed to as fans over the last several years. And it's time to finally invest heavily in the squad. We've not really seen heavy levels of investment for 5 years, 2018. So if FSG go through this window without heavy amounts to spend, and obviously it's encouraging that we're about to get some major piece of business done, what looks like this week, but that, as you say, should just be the start. It should be the absolute minimum. There still needs to be a fair bit of business that needs to get done before the window slams shut. So let's kind of treat this with cautious optimism, but judge them at the end of the window in a couple of months' time.
No, absolutely. As we said, look, Conroy, we've been starved. I've always said we do great business, we just don't do enough of it, and we've been starved of sort of, especially in the central midfield area, and we all know, we sort of, what's the word? I don't want to use any inappropriate words, but we chased Jude Bellingham. We thought the right player, but then I think we realized as a coach, as owners, as always part of the recruitment staff, I think we underestimated the task in hand. We had far more to do than they imagined, and obviously FSG have a budget, like every club, but of course and then that budget was affected by lack of Champions League. So I kind of think it forced us into being creative. And I tend to think when we're at our creative best, we're probably at our best, if you know what I mean. So when we go for sort of the signings ranging from the 30 to 50 million pound mark, our record suggests we buy stunners. We also buy stunners in Alisson and Virgil van Dijk. But I mean, that is our go-to price, right? Sweet spot. So from my understanding and from all the reputable journalists that have come out today and said it, like I said on the show yesterday, my understanding is the total package is about 45. Total package. What I've understood today is the actual base release clause figure is 38 million pound. The add-ons, the bonuses are negotiable. I don't believe they will be disclosed. It will be undisclosed. But 38 million as a base release clause figure, we've done our homework, Conroy. I love when we do our homework.
Yeah, and I think we've said actually in the last year that it's maybe been a bit frustrating at times. And to be fair, some of those transfers we criticised at the start, we've changed our tune on some of them. But I think it's actually it's very surprising that you can get a deal like that, because when you heard some of the rumours about, let's say, 45, I was thinking base 45 plus add-ons, maybe you're talking 60 million, maybe 15 million add-ons, you know what usually happens. But for that to be the rumoured price, it really is quite a brilliant deal to get over the line. I don't really think, and I said yesterday, and you obviously have to take it in context, but I do think it's a bargain. Like, in the context of what signings are going for nowadays, 45 million, or even you want to say 38 million base, that's in the way I look at that, that's like a 20, 25 million signing 5 years ago. Like you'd take a chance on a player, not a punt, but you wouldn't be heartbroken if it didn't work out. So I think for me, it's outstanding. I would also say as well that I heard some stuff earlier about there's comments on. I know it's not been confirmed yet, but about the way Brighton and the player have kind of dealt with this. He obviously signed a contract recently to give the club a bit of value as well for him as an asset. So you can tell that there's, at least so far anyway, it seems like there's a good relationship between the player and the club. And again, Brighton are ran very well, so that's not surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, Mo, it's a great start to the window, considering the disastrous season. And let's not make any bones about it. It was a disastrous season. People can have their own opinion on what they feel was deemed a disaster. For me, a team that is challenging for a quadruple, before the season started, barely 5 months before the season started, that ends up finishing outside the Champions League places without any progress in any of the cup competitions, and losing out to the Champions League place to a team like Manchester United. And of course, newbies Newcastle. To me, that's a disaster. We needed to make a statement. We have to make a statement in this window. I totally agree with you that this is the biggest transfer window under FSG, I believe, and possibly in Jurgen Klopp's managerial career, because I think he's under potentially huge pressure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that if you analyze the season that's just finished, yes, FSG could have invested a little bit more last summer, but I actually point the blame in terms of a lack of incomings more at not the owners, but the manager himself, Jurgen Klopp. He himself, right at the end of that window, said, I made a mistake. I should have listened to others.
Yep.
I understand that he was presented with a variety of different midfielders, and he said no. There were only two that apparently he was interested in. Tchouameni, who decided not to join us and to join Raul instead, and Bellingham. And everyone else he was really not interested in. And that was a massive mistake.
Massive.
He put a huge amount of faith and showed loyalty to players that ultimately proved to let him down. Is the long and short of it. He felt that midfield was good to go for another year. Lots and lots of fans, lots and lots of journalists were questioning whether that was the right decision or not. And they were proven right, and he was proven wrong. So he had, by his high standards, possibly his worst ever season in terms of what he achieved the season prior to where he ended up. Lots of mistakes, not only with recruitment, team selections, tactics, listening to some of his coaching staff more than he should have, and lots more besides. And Julian Ward, sporting director, is, I believe, a person that wanted to move on largely because of Jurgen Klopp. So he has a lot of credit in the bank over all his success over the last 6-7 years. Absolutely. However, that can only get you so far. So he has a lot to prove. And one of the ways he can do that is by showing he's learning from his mistakes. So the fact that we might be signing 2, 3, 4 midfielders will be a promising start. But beyond that, we'll need to see the proof in the pudding when the season starts. And we'll need to see that this team can build on its form in the last few weeks of the season just finished and take it into next season and become a team that can potentially challenge again. So, he, I think more than anyone, was to blame for the season that saw us finish 5th. But I think, he deserves absolutely the opportunity to rectify that. And he needs to do that by making those signings. And importantly, going away from some of that loyalty. So it's all well and good signing 3, 4 midfielders. If Jordan Henderson still continues to be a regular starter, then what has he really learned? Obviously there's many people that are big fans of Jordan Henderson. I think his days as a top performer are done. I think his legs are going. His regression last season for me was immense. And if he continues to be a regular starter, despite a number of new incomings, then that for me would be quite worrying.
Yeah, look, I know you're not the biggest fan of Jordan Henderson. I'm not a big fan of the current Jordan Henderson or the one that we've just seen. I don't think anyone is. I don't think anyone can defend Jordan Henderson. And I think there's many players that come into that category, I believe. I agree with you. There's many that come into the category. I'm not a fan of this Virgil van Dijk that we saw. We done the rating show yesterday, and I was very, very critical of Virgil van Dijk. Fabinho, people of the channel will know my views on Fabinho. I put him in the category where you may put Henderson in the season before, whereas you foresee him finishing and ending and saying, look, stop it before it gets really bad. I put Fabinho in that category. But you're spot on. You're spot on. Not only does FSG have to learn from their mistakes, but also Jurgen Klopp. And I always put it down to a collective as opposed to just blaming sections or layers of Liverpool. It's always the collective. Guys, there's over 720 of you guys and not even 300 likes. If you think I'm going to be speaking about our new target or our main target now, before I'll get to 300 likes, then you're wasting your time. You might as well log off, because I'm going to wait until 300 likes before I hit before I start talking about anything else. Conroy, World Cup winner, 24, peak of his career, joining us as a Europa League team. What does it say for the price that we're getting him? So we're getting a World Cup winner about to get into the prime of his career, playing the Premiership, because he's had Premier League experience. As I said, World Cup winner, international, played at a very good progressive coach, De Zerbi, and Potter underneath there. Before that, knows all the Premier League teams inside out, and we've still managed to pull him, even though all for under 40 million. It shows we are still a great institution.
No, absolutely. And I think obviously the possibility to work under Klopp, even though he's not had a great year, it's still a big pool. Let's disregard that. You've seen what he's done. You can always look at the examples of Salah, Mane, even Bobby to a certain extent. Like,
Yeah,
they come in as good players and he makes them great players. We talk about the sweet spot signings, but him and his staff are a good habit of that. We can talk about, is it maybe specifically with the system he has, but it works, and he's always developed players, especially in our team. Robertson's another one. Trent, you can maybe put in his own, because just the ability of that kid's ridiculous on a creative side. But if you're Mac Allister, you've seen that in the past as well. And also, so that's from the coaching side and the ability side and where you can get. And as Moa said to Grizz last night and the panel, I think this guy's ceiling's higher than people think it is. I think, to me, he can hit another level. I think if you watched him in a World Cup final, he was having the time of his life, gets an assist in the World Cup final. This was a player who was not even thought of to start the World Cup. Bear in mind, then he starts the game against Poland and starts in a World Cup final, gets assist. So he's had a lot happening. And I was watching, I think I said it recently, I was watching that documentary, the Messi documentary on BBC, and a lot of the coach Scaloni says specifically, he doesn't really feel pressure, Mac Allister. Now, I know people can say that, but what they mean by that, it's not in the sense of he doesn't really get too emotional, that's maybe one thing if you talk about Argentinian and that Argentinian squad. They do, bar and Messi, they're quite an emotional squad. So I think that's a really other underrated quality he's got as well. And I think the last point on him, Grizz, for me, is I feel like he looks at us and feels like we're second, nearly quadruple last year, but there's a changing of the guard right now, and I feel like he has got that confidence to feel like he can come to this team, and it's not just about him, but be a pivotal part, be that guy, be one of the guys in the team, because I really think his confidence, he's still very young, I feel like he believes he can get to a world class level.
Mo, also, from what we know and what we hear, and especially the way he's been dealing with this situation with his dad, which to me, each to their own, but to me is a good sign when you've still bestowed the responsibility on your father to handle your dealings, to me is a sign of maturity, to me is a sign of good upbringing, no dickhead policy, basically. You know, the Jurgen no dickheads? We don't sign dickheads. We don't sign people that have come for money. We don't sign for people that only Champions League. Everything points and should suggest. And his time at Brighton, the way the last day he went around crying in tears with the Brighton. This guy, to me, as I said, we don't know too much about him yet, but we will get to know. He's a very classy guy all round. What do you think of that? And also going on to his playing ability and his playing style, are you a fan? Was you a fan? Did you watch him in the World Cup? And how do you see him fitting into the system as currently the one that we've deployed?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the player himself as an individual, you're right. It's something that Klopp values very highly. A player can be an absolutely sensational baller, but if off the pitch he's a dickhead, if he's an individual, if he's somebody that puts himself above the team, Klopp won't even consider bringing him to the club. So, that in itself is something that I think the club does a good job of, in terms of due diligence. And let's not forget, one of Mr. Klopp's former neighbours in Adam Lallana, has been around Mac Allister for, a season or two now, and has gotten to know the player very well. And I'm sure would have reported back to Jurgen and said, look, this kid's sound. He's a professional. He will work hard on the training pitch. He will work hard.
Massive say. Adam Lallana, massive behind the scenes on both sides. As a, what would you call it, Mo? Liaisons officer for the both.
Yeah, absolutely. A matchmaker of sorts,
Matchmaker. There you go.
Yeah. So, I think Klopp, certainly values that, especially from people that he trusts and values the opinions of, and Adam Lallana is one of them. So I think that would have counted for something for sure. In terms of having watched him during the World Cup, not a great deal, being honest. But I did watch some of Brighton this season, and what I saw of him impressed me. He and Caicedo, especially in the centre of the park, between them were sensational. And I think there will have to be a little bit of adaptation, I should say, in that it appeared to me from when I did watch Brighton, he played a bit more centrally, whereas perhaps in our system, he'll perhaps have to veer either left or right, perhaps more left-sided, and then perhaps we'll see what happens. But he appears to be fairly flexible. And I think one of the things that I like, and which I've been a little bit critical about this club of, is we've not really had enough goal contributions from the centre of the park. And yeah, I mean, we've absolutely had great success despite a lack of goals and whatnot from midfielders. But sometimes having somebody that can score a bit more or carries a greater goal threat could have made the difference in seasons past. And, it does sometimes come down to marginal differences in terms of winning league titles or making top four or not making top four. So, if he's a player, I mean, he scored 10 goals this season in the Premier League. So if he can match that or even exceed it, that's a big difference compared to what we saw from our midfielders in the season of 22-23.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, as I said, it's not a done deal. We have to bear that in mind. We know we've had instances in the past, Nabil Fekir, where even the medical has taken place, even the video shoot that is scheduled for Wednesday to take place. Things can still go pear-shaped, guys. Until he's signed that legal document, then he won't be a Liverpool player. But until then, the hope is and the faith is that he will become a Liverpool football club player, representative. I, for one, am excited. I'm very excited with the new price that has been revealed and disclosed to me. As I said, Conroy, yesterday, I wasn't overly excited at 60, 70 million. I thought, if that's the majority of our budget being spent, then possible repercussions later on in the window. But now there's no excuse, or there shouldn't be. And this is where Mo will be adamant as well. And all the not so fond of FSG people in the chat, there's over 850 of you close to. Hope you guys have all smashed the like button, subscribed. Even the haters that are in here, welcome. You're all very, very welcome. I love you all. I, for one, now I'm excited more than anxious about what we do for the remaining window. Does it make sense? The reason why I'm excited more than anxious now, because in the past, if we had spent 70 million, I would have been anxious. How the hell are we going to, because we know we've got limited budget. How the hell are we going to get 3-4 more players for the remainder of the budget? Whereas now we've got a player in for under 40 million. Now I know we can definitely afford, and we've got the man with the accounts who can tell us we can definitely afford more than 2 or 3 players to finish off the window.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, we mentioned it before, it's we'd love this big treasure chest of cash, but that's not how we're ran, so we have to go within our means.
Treasure
and I feel
chest. People call it a war chest. You've
war
tried to call it a
chest,
treasure chest.
yeah.
No, it's
Well,
all right. Treasure's different. I like it.
yeah, not bad. But
Treasure.
I just think ultimately we can say that, but it's not realistic. We've got to be realistic, because enough people to criticise it, understandably at times, and I agree with a lot of that at times. But we have to go with what we've got, and so I feel like if you can get this in the door, it allows you to view potential other signings that, okay, maybe you've budgeted, let's say, just off the top of my head, let's say 20 to 30 mil you had for, let's say, another midfielder. I know it's going to be more than that, but let's just say that was what we're looking at. But because you've managed to save a bit on this as well, it could even maybe broaden those targets as well. Or it might help you out later in the road where you're maybe having a target that everything's ready to go, but you just need a little bit more to get it over the line. Like, I'm not an expert in finances of these deals, but I do know at times some are easier than others. I wish all ours were smooth, but that doesn't always seem to be the case. But yeah, I think it's excellent, to be honest. I genuinely think it's if I'd said to you at the start of the year, first signing will be a week after the league finishes, if it goes ahead, 24 World Cup winner, gets assist in the World Cup final, you'd be very surprised if that was at 38 million. I mean, that's West Ham's, put it in perspective, West Ham signed Skamaka for 40 million, Morgan Gibbs-White, who actually had a very good season, 40 million for Notts Forest, 42 million, I think it was. So in perspective, it's just an outstanding signing if we can get it over the line.
Just a couple of super chats that I want to get through before we get into who's next, you ask. Are we still pursuing Manu Kone? El Lad says, sorry, I forgot to bring it up. Yes, I believe he is still one of 5-6 names that I've heard we're interested in. So there's no point talking about all the names that we're interested in, especially on today's show. Today's show, I'm going to specifically give you a name that I was given today of concrete, firm negotiations taking place. Maybe as we speak, I don't know. Maybe they're still talking. But as of today, my friend Bilal from Slough, big up. Maybe I shouldn't have exposed where you're from, but I've done it now. It's too late. Forgive me. Evening, lads. Mr. Chatra, who'd be your preferred additional 2 or 3 midfield signings? And hoping we get a left centre back. Your choice. Great work as always. I guess that segues into what I want to speak about now. We've spoken about what we've done so far and what we need to do. So I guess I want to combine that super chat, Mo, into which was my question. What do we do next? What do you want to see next for the remainder of the window? Position-wise, numbers-wise.
Okay, so position-wise, for me, the absolute bare minimum in terms of midfield recruitment was three midfielders, perhaps even 4. Yes, we've got, Curtis, we've got Fabinho, Henderson, Elliot, though for me, he's not a midfielder. We've got, and obviously Thiago, though, there are rumours that, by the end of the window, he might be going back to Spain. We'll see. But, minimum 3. And, if we get one of those over the line this week, that leaves 2 more. And with the names that are floating around, and there's some strong links, obviously, all the indications are that we should be getting about 3 in. So that's good. But on top of that, the system that we've been deploying over the last couple of months is really essentially a back 3. And Andy Robertson, who in my view has been on the decline now for a good couple of years, though it's been a gradual decline, admittedly, and there are times when he still plays exceptionally well, is not really, for me, a neat fit in that new system. He's a bit of square peg in a round hole. So I think that a proper left-sided centre-back that can still adapt into playing as a left-back, if we revert to a 4-4-3 in a conventional way, would be good. And you know, who we could bring into that position. I mean, obviously, again, there are a couple of links out there. You know, Timber, I think, is one of the names that's been mentioned. But you know, if money was no object, you know, I would look at Guardiola and trying to kind of fit him into that back three. And in the same way, you know, again, if money was no object, you know, I'd love Caicedo. I think that he is an exceptional player, though clearly he won't be available for the kind of fee when you are near that we're going to be bringing Mac Allister in at. So again, that's not realistic. But all of that said, you know, the rumour over the last 2-3 months is that FSG quietly have been in talks around selling a minority stake. So, you know, they might be intentionally keeping their powder dry in order for selling clubs not to you know, hear about, okay, well, FSG are about to come into a windfall of, you know, 300-400 million pounds. So if that is in the works and it is advanced, then why not use some of that to get a little bit more business done? So, you know, in answer to your final question, you know, I'd still be hopeful we top in 200 million. Now, that might include some sales as well. But I think, you know, it's definitely affordable, even without significant sales, you know. So, you know, the complaint is often, you know, we have to spend what we generate from sales. That's not the case this window. You know, we've not done a huge amount of business over the last 4 years. So, you know, there are funds there. And I put out a short thread just, I think, last week saying even despite the loss at Champions League football, we'll probably still generate £570 million next season, which is huge. So the money's there, and I hope we spend it.
Money's there, you know, but I find it more, Conor, you know me, I don't really care about how much we spend as long as we do the required business. That's always been my motto. So it doesn't matter to me if a player costs 100 million or 40 million, as long as it's not hampering Jurgen Klopp and his vision for how he wants to see this team playing. One of the criticisms that we all made is, okay, we're all allowed an animal in our life.
Yeah, sorry, maybe it was buzzing to answer the question there, so she had to jump up.
Yeah, she's getting excited with the name I'm about to drop. You see, she wants in on it. There's 1,000 of you, loyal, disloyal, unloyal, faithful, unfaithful, subscribers, fans. Like the stream, subscribe if you haven't. I should be, according to these numbers, I should be up to 30k now, but I'm not. I'm still about 50, 60 short. So if you're just here for transfer talk, fair play to you lot, but come on, show a bit of loyalty, smash that like. Conroy, one of the accusations of Liverpool that we've seen this season past is the lack of energy, fight, drive, legs. Are you actually looking to see who we complement Mac Allister with now? Because to me, that's all important. Yeah. Mac Allister is a wonderful technician. Sorry to use Brendan's words. You know, he's got great character, brilliant technician. But we need energy, legs, one-on-one dual merchants who will win their battles and then let the likes of Mac Allister and Trent, of course, do what they do best. Is that the profile of player that you're absolutely looking towards, or are you looking for more eights like we scouted Mason Mount, who's linked with us? Obviously, looks like he's going to United now.
For me, I think it's down the athleticism, legs route, you know, and it's not just like any player for that. Obviously, you want them to have quality, but I think it's not rocket science. Our transition's been very poor, and when you've basically trying to play a certain way that those players can't do it anymore, it's not going to work. It really isn't that hard to get your head around. And I feel like that's important for us, especially like I think Mac Allister, to be fair, he can press and he can work hard, but like he's not a defensive combative midfielder, if you know what I mean. Whereas I feel like some of the targets we're looking at, that's what we need to stop that transition, to stop being so vulnerable in that. And as well, it'll allow us, if we want to press higher like we used to do, to really suffocate teams in and to have the players to play that way. And let's be perfectly honest, Klopp's success came through playing that way. Dortmund was playing that way. Us winning trophies and getting was playing that way. There's been tweaks. I'm not saying it's all the same, but ultimately that's his mantra. And I think at times this season we have changed with putting Trent in midfield recently, but there's a lot of examples where trying other ways didn't work. So I feel like that's what he's good at, that coaching staff's good at. So I'm still very much of that opinion. And I feel like, thankfully, who we're looking at, we're complimenting that. I've seen some stuff, we're not looking at exactly at a 6, and I've kind of criticised that the past couple of weeks. But I do think some of the players we're looking at, they've got a lot of traits that you could use as a potential 6. If you want to play a 2 there with maybe Trent as a box at the back, you've got a lot of the same qualities that you could do there with, let's say, maybe a Thuram or probably a Kone. You could say can do that as well. So I'm not as worried as I was for that. I just think, as I said earlier, we cannot be going into next season with Fabinho starting every game for the season. I just think you're asking for, it's a mistake in my opinion for that one. And I feel like getting those legs will really, really help us. Chris, do you feel as well that this kind of idea of getting, like, let's say like a technician, I feel like bar Mason Mount, who we're going for an addition, let's say we get Mac Allister, I think Mason Mount for me was a really big shout. Was you could see, if you maybe watch what he's trying to do with Henderson with this new system, play kind of high and wide to the right. Well, you've seen Mason Mount play there before, so he would suit that and also be able to play in midfield. I feel like the targets we're seeing now is kind of went more to that athleticism, just to, as I said, for those reasons. But do you think we sometimes get preoccupied because we see what other teams are doing, like Brighton, Man City? But I don't think that's us. I don't think we're never death by a thousand cuts, tiki-taka. That's not us. That's never been the way that we've been massively successful. There's parts of possession in that, but I wouldn't say it's the philosophy.
See, I think it's fine margins, guys. I know where you're coming from, and I know me and you have discussed it in private, and we've done it on shows as well. And Mo can partake in this conversation as well for the first time, probably as well. But I think there's fine margins. I know you've mentioned how Jurgen Klopp has built this team and how we've won the Premier League and Champions League, which was based on the Brexit midfield. The hardworking, the energizer bunnies, non-stop, and then let the front three do the magic, and Robertson and Trent in their absolute prime, assisting from fullback area. What we then tried to do was evolve that, introduce, and the biggest turning point of that was the signing of Thiago Alcantara. The signing of Thiago Alcantara essentially to replace Gini Wijnaldum. I get it. It wasn't a direct replacement, but you guys know what I mean. Playing style-wise, it completely changed. Thiago Alcantara isn't a Gini Wijnaldum, and is proven to not be as well. The introduction of Harvey Elliott, the introduction of Curtis Jones, suddenly, at the same time, the demise of the front three, physical demise, I'd say, Bobby Firmino, Sadio Mane, it was apparent. We changed styles, but guys, I think short memories. That style nearly got us to complete football. We came in within minutes, literally, and a Champions League man of the match, one of the world's greatest goalkeepers, man of the match performances from literally winning it all. So is it to say that we would have said, that style didn't work for us if we had won the quadruple, for example? So it's fine margins, but listening to Jurgen Klopp this season, like we all have, not only me, like we've been listening to Jurgen Klopp, and how many times has he spoken about the need to get back to being difficult to play against? My biggest admiration for the team that I supported was, I used to tell Arsenal fans, Chelsea fans, United fans, do you know we're nasty to play against? You're gonna hate playing us, and they used to hate playing us. I think it's fair to say, Mo, we became a soft, easy touch. We were so easy to play against last season, and that really, really killed me inside. And it has, by the looks of it, really changed Jurgen Klopp's philosophy on how he wants to go moving forward?
I mean, Jurgen Klopp's renowned for this heavy metal brand of football, and yet in more recent times it became like soft rock. And I think he wants to go back to Fear Factory, Machine Head, Slipknot, Sepultura. So metalheads out there, you understand what I'm talking about. That brand of football once again, high energy, high tempo, relentless, aggressive, and that is what has been missing. If you look at running stats, we were compiling the most amount of mileage in a match about 4 seasons ago, and yet in 22-23 we were running amongst the least of any football club in the Premier League. And part of the reason is because we had a lack of turnover of players. It was a lot of the same players that have been playing for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a very demanding style. And you can't, these are human beings at the end of the day. They're not machines. Footballers haven't been replaced by AI just yet.
Not quite. It's going that way. If you look at Man City's players, it looks like some of them are.
You would wonder, yeah. Exactly. But look, and that is why it's the toll that it's taken. All these minutes, I mentioned Andy Robertson before, an absolute legend for this club, a soldier, a warrior. But even he has racked up so many minutes over the last 5 years, and it's taken a toll. You have a limited shelf life playing under Jurgen Klopp. And I think Jurgen Klopp himself struggled to accept that. And that is part of the reason why he's never successfully overhauled a team. Mm-hmm. He didn't do it at Mainz. He didn't do it at Dortmund. He hasn't done it at Liverpool so far. So let's hope that this season coming up is where, for the first time in his career, he manages that. But it is all key to getting the right players in and then putting that system in place that works to his strengths. And if we get back to that with the right personnel, then with confidence running through and all the rest of it that goes with it, we will be right up there again. I'm confident of that. I think if you look at all of the teams that were in the Premier League this season, for me on paper, despite players within that squad that were past their best, we were still, in my view, the second best squad in the Premier League. But it was a lack of confidence, huge amount of injuries, and all sorts of other issues that caused us to finish fifth. But with the right recruitment, we can easily go back to being the main challenger to City once more.
Part of that recruitment, guys, it's time to reveal what I've been told today. Reliably informed, I believe the people that speak to me. You don't have to. You can just ignore it. Log off now, block me, call me what you want. I can't give a shit. I'll just block you and then laugh at you behind the block screen while you lot moan in your little groups and cliques. Oh, Grizz has blocked me now. Well, you act like a prick, you're going to get blocked. I've been told today reliably that we are to place a substantial bid for Kefren Turam, or currently of Nice. I believe 6'4" central midfielder, box to box, some would say. You could play him as an 8, either on the right side or the left side, predominantly left-sided 8, I believe. I will be getting an expert on Kefren Turam later on in the week to discuss it if things develop, but I'm confident they will, so therefore I will get someone. Kefren Turam, people, I believe the bid will be in the region of, wait for it, we're bargain hunters, we are, in the region, our opening bid will be in the region of 30-35 million. I have no idea what will happen to that bid, if it will be accepted or whatever, but Kefren Turam is our fully bona fide target to bring in next. Kefren Turam, Conroy, any insight into the player, the profile, the price?
Yeah, well, actually, I looked at him this weekend. That was just a coincidence, but you obviously seen some of the rumours and that. Plays for Nice. I watched a bit of Liga this season as well. Not gonna lie, you know I love Messi, so that's where most of that came into place. But yeah, I've actually been very impressed in some of the clips I've watched. I'm not saying I'm seeing him in every game, but we just talked about that physicality and having that ability, you know, in transition and just to press and work in the system Klopp wants to play. But he's also showed like his technical ability, not necessarily being a technician, but he's got a bit to his game as well, and that side of things. I thought what I found interesting is the goals or the assists they got. It was like quite a bit of variety, which I think really suits our team because you have to be maybe a bit adaptable as well. You mentioned there, Grizz, a left or a right sided eight. I think he looked great. I think press resistant. Was quite impressed with that as well when I was watching him. I think to me it's an ideal signing, and I feel like it's one that suits what Mo just said about going back to not back to basics, but back to what was successful. Maybe we tried this evolution; it's not quite worked to the way they wanted it to, and this would be a key sign for me that would suit going back to that. You know, we say physical monsters, if you know what I mean, if that's the correct term to say, but really to, you know, suffocate teams, I think he would be brilliant for that. And I think as well, it's one of them that I got mixed up. He was in the French was it under 21 squad or under 20 squad. I know he scored when he was playing for them. So you can tell that you look at us, the potential sky high for this kid. I've just said Mac Allister, I feel he could get to that a high level. I feel like this guy, you could see a lot of similarities there. A bit younger, but he could really shine for us. So we'll see what happens. What about Grizz? See from all the hysteria at the weekend with Kone and Thuram, did you feel that what we'd said a couple of weeks ago, a player to come in that midfield, maybe not say exactly the same as Gini Wijnaldum, but someone who could bring similar assets to us, similar attributes? Do you feel like he kind of suits that? Or do you think he's going in maybe like Gini 2.0, or do you think it's just completely different?
Yeah, I wouldn't compare him to Gini Wijnaldum. I just think I tell you what is a good comparison with him and Gini Wijnaldum. Guys, do you remember when Gini Wijnaldum used to pick up the ball and decide, right, I'm going on a 30-meter charge here, and you can do what you want, but you're not getting the ball off me. Kefren Turam has that drive with the ball. He's a magnificent, one of the best ball progressors in Europe at such a young age. So that actually is a very good comparison to Gini Wijnaldum. Of course, Gini Wijnaldum off the ball was probably one of the best I've ever seen, one of the best we've all ever seen.
Yeah.
Obviously, that wasn't always talked about and sort of seen. You can't show. That's one of the intangibles that you can't, sort of see up in stats maybe. Kefren Turam probably off the ball, absolutely understandable. He's still young, can learn that. But in terms of ball progression, in terms of driving, in terms of energy, in terms of legs, what we need, in terms of our midfield, where we haven't seen enough of, like Mo was talking about, goals, and people arriving late in the box from midfield, deep surging runs. He will bring that. I think he's, again, one of the players that we've discussed that not specific to one role, has the attributes to be evolved into a couple of roles. And I don't believe we will buy an out-and-out DM, for example, but I've often tweeted, if anybody unfortunate enough to follow me on Twitter, I've often referred to us buying players and molding and using the attributes to how we want them and Jurgen Klopp wants them. A la Gini Wijnaldum, Curtis Jones, Bobby Firmino, even Fabinho. We've utilized their attributes and used them in the past how we want them. Even Henderson has been sort of utilized in something he wasn't. He played at number 6 for us quite a bit. So I think Thuram fits that.
Can I just add one thing to that, just on your point, which I think what you brought up in my mind there, when we were in for Gravenberch, and I was looking at like his qualities on the ball, you can definitely see, you mentioned a ball carrier, that's obviously something they're looking at, because that was one of his biggest strengths as well, being press resistant and obviously carrying the ball out of the field, getting attacking areas. So I think as you were discussing there, you can see they're looking at different traits, but maybe using it a slightly different way. I mean, Gini Wijnaldum was a winger / forward for Newcastle. I think, was he not their top goal scorer when they got relegated? I think he was. So absolutely, it shows you.
Yeah, Mo, with the news of Kefren Turam, I also add that I believe we have agreed personal terms with him. From what I believe, From what I've been told, I believe his father is favouring a move to us. More positive signs, more father and son relationships, and most importantly, more good players potentially being added to the squad. Kefren Turam, give us what you think, what you know.
Yeah, I can't profess to have watched loads of him, so I'm not going to pretend along those lines. But in terms of the profile, what I've listened to about him, paying attention to those that I trust in terms of the scouting side, I think that he has an immense amount of potential. And one of the things that we've seen us do really well is not buy world-class ready-made players. Instead, we've turned players with potential into world-class players. And I think that from all of what I've seen and heard and read about Thuram, I think that that's the kind of player he potentially is. Somebody who physically has everything that's needed to become a top midfield player. And he's shown signs at Nice of that great amount of potential. And I think with the right kind of coaching, with the right players around him, and with the right attitude as well, the sky's the limit for him. And I think for me, again, I go back to us having to harken back to when our midfield was at its best, when it was at its strongest. Can Thuram help us deliver that? I think he absolutely can. Yes, he is a different kind of a player to a Gini Wijnaldum, but at the same time, he can slot in and add certain things that even Wijnaldum didn't bring to the table.
Yes, spot on.
So that's for me is where I think it's all about the collective and something being greater than the sum of its parts. So if we exploit the strengths and maximize those strengths of him, Mac Allister, and whoever that third player is, and if they mesh well together and are supplemented by the likes of Curtis, who showed huge amounts in the closing weeks of the season, then we'll have a midfield to be reckoned with in the Premier League in the season coming up and in seasons to come. And if we get it nailed down with the age profile that we're looking at, we won't have to sign another midfielder for probably several more years.
We have, I have received a bit more information just before I came on stream. And so we're talking about sort of, let's just play kind of a comparative game or comparison game in our own heads. This is not factual. This is just opinions and how maybe we see things like this. So Mac Allister as the ball player, guys. Mount was the player that we wanted to get into the box from deep, energized on the right-hand side, protecting, also covering an attack, good presser, good off the ball, loads of energy, loads of legs. Obviously, it seems as though he's gone to United, and so therefore we've chosen Thuram, who many would argue is probably the better profile or better player of the two. Anyway, the other profile of central midfielder I'd suggest is a dynamic ball winner, but not a DM per se, someone who has experience of playing in a 2 or possibly can be molded into playing as a number 6. We know the Manu Kone links. I'm not going to speak on that yet because I haven't received any concrete information from the people that I speak to, but we know that we are interested in Manu Kone. I've been told today that we spoke to the representatives and agents of Romeo Lavia, the young player from Southampton. It's very obvious that we're keeping our options open and having loads of options, basically 2 or 3 in each profile, it seems. Some people are asking, for example, our lad says, Grizz, what's the thinking behind the Vega links? I think Vega would have been probably a Mount Thuram alternative. He's an absolute clone for Mason Mount. If you ask me how to describe Vega, he's an absolute clone of Mason Mount. Similar profile, similar playing style, similar energy levels. So I'm not too sure if we'll pursue that one. That's just opinion. If we do, I'd be very happy with it. Again, someone with a 35 million release clause. So it fits our sweet spot price that we like to go for. Romeo Lavia, the youngest of all the players that we've been linked with in terms of definitive interest now. We spoke to his people. I don't think it's a priority of ours, but I think it's just an option that we're keeping open and possible solution to our problems of that third profile. Thoughts on Romeo Lavia, Conroy?
Yeah, I think we just mentioned this previously. For me, and on a lot of the chat saying this and now, what is 19, nearly 20, 19 years old. A lot of the comparisons straight away will say, not that they're the same player, but they'll say you've got Stefan Bajcetic, who's got in the first team and has performed well for us this season. So why would you go and sign another 19-year-old? Like, they've both got different strengths and weaknesses. Don't get me wrong. It's not a blanket statement for both of them. However, I think this is the way I look at this one. I do agree that I feel like I'd be a bit underwhelmed if he was the signing to go with, let's say, Mac Allister, Thuram, or you want to have the box midfield, let's say with Trent, Lavia, and say Mac Allister, Thuram, however you want to, shape that up. However, if it's maybe Southampton or have just been relegated, Liverpool are maybe seeing there's an opportunity to get a good deal over the line for a bit of contingency planning, a bit of continuity planning, which Mo and myself have just criticised on the show about how we've failed to do that in the past, and then I would understand it. But I think this one's about perspective of what the signing's actually for. Is it to start in the first team straight away, or are we just being opportunistic? That's where my head's at with this one. So I'm kind of 50-50.
Mo, Romeo Lavia, does that tick any of your boxes? Look, if we're talking about Fabinho to be given one more season to sort of redeem himself of the horrible season, I'm not even looking at the last 10 games and saying give him a pat on the back because he was that bad in the opening 30 games or whatever it was. Lavia is a project for sure. But again, has he got the attributes to learn and be molded into the successor to Fabinho if we were to pursue him?
Potentially. I mean, if you listen again to people that watch huge amounts of football, they'll say, yeah, Lavia absolutely is a work in progress, but in terms of his potential upside, it's as high as any player of that age.
Yes,
massive potential, and obviously with any player with a huge amount of potential, too often we see it not materialize into anything substantive. So if we did sign him, maybe the better thing would be to send him out on loan to the right kind of club that plays the right kind of football and see how he develops there, rather than keep him on the bench for us. Maybe his minutes are very limited to just Carabao and FA Cup matches. And is that the best thing for his development? Perhaps not. So, yeah, I mean, if we did sign him, my inclination would be to loan him out, rather to make him a player that might not even make the matchday squad most weeks.
Yeah. Look, I appreciate all of you lot asking about different players. We're not going to go through a whole heap of players because we could be here all night. I believe Liverpool are in talks with at least 5-6 central midfielders, at least 3 or 4 centre backs, because that's the market we're dealing with. That's the way we deal with things. We've seemingly become more active this summer. Have to, in most cases, in most of our opinions, have to be active. And of course, incomings will be, I think, substantial. I think we're probably looking at least another 3 incomings, at least another 3 after Mac Allister. But let's see how it goes. But with that mode, there has to be, or there's probably will be some tough decisions. One of the most tough decisions that Klopp has to make now is what he does with Fabio Carvalho. Fabio Carvalho, we know, has been interested. Fabrizio Romano has while been on air or just before we came on air, has spoke about Leipzig being interested in him making a first bid and then possibly coming back with another bid. I'm not aware of that, but Fabrizio is the king. So Fabrizio says it. It's what I do know is Burnley and West Ham have also made loan inquiries. Fabrizio is suggesting Leipzig want him permanently. From what I understand, Burnley and West Ham want him for a season-long loan and are prepared to pay £1.5 million for a loan fee, which is obviously nothing. What's your thoughts on the Carvalho then? What do you do with Carvalho?
It's a difficult one because on the one hand, we clearly were after him in a big way because, we didn't manage to get him over the line in January 22, and yet we went back for him in the summer and got the deal done. So we didn't give up on him, and we clearly saw something in him, or somebody at the club saw something in him. I'm not convinced Klopp saw something in him because he really, for me, didn't show enough faith in the player. He didn't give him enough of a chance. Certainly, if you look at the chances he gave to Harvey Elliott, for me, that was an experiment, and it was ultimately a failed experiment. He got far too many minutes in midfield. And yeah, I mean, sure, some of the performances from Elliott were pretty decent, but there were many where he was completely out of his depth. So that was a player who got chance after chance. Carvalho, almost the opposite. So it seemed a bit odd. It seemed a bit of an odd one that why have we put so much effort into getting him into the club and then putting so little in terms of opportunities to really develop him? And what's his future really looking like? Not so great. So I think the better thing might be perhaps to even sell him and have a buyback option. So if he develops elsewhere, we have potentially first refusal on him. Obviously, the loan option might be a good one as well. But given the system changes we saw, I'm not really sure exactly where he fits in. And especially with the depth we have up front as well, I think he'd have a real hard time getting a look in. So, yeah, I don't see how he has any real long-term future at the club. So it might be better to cut our losses and move him on.
I've already spoken to you, Conroy, about Fabio. We spoke about it on the Red Fellas last night, so there's no much point. I'll reiterate. I believe if Fabio Carvalho leaves Liverpool this summer, either if it's a loan, I think that will be the end of Fabio Carvalho's career. I think if he stays, that will be a very good positive sign for him. But even if he's sort of said to be sent out on loan with whatever or buyback clause if he's sold, yeah, I think that will be the end of Fabio Carvalho, which will be a shame, which will raise a few questions, and we'll address those questions if that happens. But it hasn't happened yet. We just know that a lot of clubs are obviously alerted to the availability because these inquiries don't come just out of the blue, guys. There is some conversations being had with agents, clubs, players that, you know what, Fabio Carvalho may be available at Liverpool. And so therefore these clubs are coming into conversation. People asking about all sorts. Guys, this has been an impromptu show just about Mac Allister and the name that I've given you guys today, which we will be hearing more of in the next 48 hours, I believe. Kefren Turam, I believe an official approach bid will be going in the next couple of days. And we'll see how that pans out. Guys, I thank you very much for your time. Mo, it's an absolute pleasure. Of course, we will be having you on far more regularly, hopefully, fingers crossed. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And Conroy, thanks for doing a bit of overtime today.
No worries.
I've taken you out of your comfort zone of Red Fellas and all the other fellas around you. So, but you was magnificent as usual. You was brilliant as usual. So I value your friendship and your time. People in the chat, I value your subscriptions. I value your likes, your input, your love, your hatred. I value it all. It's all part and parcel of the game. Thank you very much for participating in today's Transfer Carnage. We will be back when there's a need to be back, which could be tomorrow, which could be 48 hours. You know how the game goes. This has been Transfer Carnage. Hopefully I've got the right outro. Take care. Bye-bye.